Hey, really glad you're with us for the Monday edition of the 3 Martini Lunch, and welcome to the full video era of the 3 Martini Lunch as well. If you don't already subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch on YouTube, please join the club and do that. Our reels have been there for a long time, as well as the full audio of the podcast in another place. But now you're going to get full video. So let's hope we don't butcher this. Jim, we're excited about this. We're excited to have folks seeing us in a whole different way. You'll notice that as time goes on, there's two different backgrounds for me. One is at the studios of Radio America. One is at home. Jim has one primary location where he does the podcast, but until the guys are done fixing the damage from the tree, the noise of the construction may force him to a Plan B location as well. So,
as listeners, I feel like it just enhances your enjoyment of the podcast. And now the video, if you constantly hear bang, 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 you would think that Murtaugh and Riggs were killing guys with a nail gun up above me. For those who didn't know, tree fell on the house back in May. And yes, I'm aware of what month it is. I'm suddenly relating to Boston and the Big Dig project that took forever to. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither will the home repairs be done in a day. But hopefully someday, when we celebrate this podcast's 30th anniversary, the sounds in the background will be complete. Also, Greg, one of the things I will intend to do during this podcast, because I always listen to you during everything you're saying, but I will just sit just freeze for as long as possible and see if I can get people to think, is the video working? And then a bird lands on me or something. So,
oh, that's great. Yeah, hopefully it'll be done before the snowflakes start flying. I think that's at very least the expectation over there in Authenticity Woods. All right, well, let's talk about, we got a lot to talk about today. We're going to be talking about Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, finally endorsing, probably reluctantly, but I think in her mind, weirdly, strategically, Zohran Mamdani for mayor of New York City. We're also going to be talking about Donald Trump's tweet towards the members of NATO, his letter, as he put it, towards members of NATO about getting the war over between Russia and Ukraine. And we'll also talk about some of the reaction that we're seeing here to the assassination, and then the reaction to the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So, Jim, some folks on the left just can't help themselves over at the New York Times. You've got this Jamel Bowie figure who said of Kirk, his stated beliefs were in essence that people of his ideological persuasion ought to be able to suppress the views of the people they don't like, which I'm pretty sure is the opposite of what he was doing on every campus. And then there was also a correction made the day after the killing. An earlier version of this article described incorrectly, this is a different article than the Jamel Bowie one, I think, an anti-Semitic statement that Charlie Kirk had made on an episode of his podcast. He was quoting a statement from a post on social media and was critiquing it. It was not his own statement. So again, one of those corrections that few people see and never seems to go the other way. So applause to you, New York Times, for not handling this well. But somebody who is actually having a positive and encouraging response to this is Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman. He sat down with Manu Raju of CNN, who, now that he doesn't have Joe Manchin to stake out at his houseboat at the Washington Marina, can actually talk to some other members of Congress. And so they were talking about the rhetoric on the left. And unlike most Democrats who say, oh no, the worst rhetoric is on the right, or we all need to generically tone it down, when it comes to John Fetterman, he's saying, no, the left, we got some work to do.
When I represent a state like Pennsylvania, that keeps you honest. And you always can't forget that a lot of Americans happen to disagree with you. That does not mean that they are fascists or now they want to shred the Constitution.
But when you hear some Democrats saying Trump is acting like an autocrat.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. If you actually compare him to an actual autocrat, that is not just that. Now, last night, for example, people were complaining. They were protesting about, that's the Hitler thing. You just don't ever compare anyone to Hitler and those kinds of extreme things. Now look what happened to Charlie Kirk. I mean, the man was shot. Now we have to turn the temperature down. It's like we can't compare people to these kinds of figures in history. And this is not an autocrat. This is a product of a democratic election. It's like I participated in that. It was safe and it was secure. We lost. And the America people put us in the minority. And now that's democracy. And I revere democracy. I may not like the outcome, but I have to respect that, and I have to find and work through this. And that I do believe that's what's appropriate.
So you don't think that Trump is at all shattering any of the norms of democracy in any way?
I'm saying he's definitely different, but that's what America voted for. Again, I don't agree with many of these things, but that does not make him an autocrat. That does not make someone or compare him to people like Hitler and these other outlandish things.
The Democrats are going to try to primary him so hard next year. Some of them are already getting in position. But Jim, that's what needs to be said. Every criticism of every politician, that guy's Hitler. They called George W. Bush Hitler, and he's finally calling BS on his own party on that. They're not going to like it, but it needs to happen.
Well, a point on those New York Times articles that referred, attributed to Charlie Kirk something he was quoting and was, criticizing or denouncing. I have not written for the New York Times. Listeners, if you think I'm a sellout, it's because I write columns for the Washington Post. Totally different newspaper. But I have friends who have written for the New York Times on the right side of the spectrum, and they say that when they submit a column and it gets accepted, we want to run this. Every sentence in it goes over with a fine-toothed comb, and they have to provide supporting evidence for any assertion they want to make, even if it strikes them as just common sense or not even particularly controversial. There is a really strict, heavy-handed editing process for a conservative guest contributor. And then you could just attribute something to Charlie Kirk that he never said, and there's a completely different standard there. So I think that, yes, this is the good Martini. We will be getting to the good part in a second. No, but Fetterman, if the Senate had 40-some Democrats like Fetterman, a lot could get done in this country. And the disagreements they'd have would be much more respectable. Before I dive into the rest of my thoughts, I notice he's still using the transcription device to put what someone is saying on a screen, but otherwise, Greg, he sounds a lot better. I know it's been 2 years since the stroke, and obviously these sorts of things happen gradually, but he really sounds much more like a normal person speaking. You might not necessarily know that he had that severe stroke, so God bless him. And just generally, there's got to be some space between Hitler and I support this person. There's got to be something. He's bad, and I disagree with him, but he's not among history's greatest monsters, and he's not going to send people into gas chambers. And I think a whole bunch of people would say, yes, Trump is in that category. I have disagreed. And John Fetterman would be the first to tell you he has disagreements with him. But that doesn't mean he agrees with he's basically begging the rest of his party, could you disagree sanely? Could you see your political opponents as something less than history's greatest monster? They're not saying you have to agree. They're not saying you have to knuckle under. They're not saying, Fetterman's still going to vote against a whole bunch of things the Trump administration wants to do. But besides his recognition of the fact that Trump won Pennsylvania, and I think that, Fetterman does not want to needlessly alienate Trump supporters in his state. He's got some areas of agreement. Israel most notably, but he also has said that it's nothing xenophobic about wanting to secure the border, things like that. When you have those handful of areas of agreement and you disagree with respect, without frothing at the mouth, you can get a lot done. So, kudos Senator Fetterman, and in a time where it's kind of hard to find anything on Capitol Hill that makes you feel good, not just his recovery, but his approach to politics, his approach to political disagreement is a really refreshing breath of fresh air.
No, I think you're right. What do you think of his prospects I guess he's up in 2028. I think it was 2022, right, where he won that race against Dr. Oz. So who knows what the landscape will look like by then. But playing nice, at least not calling Donald Trump Hitler, is probably not going to go too well with the base, considering where the base is right now. Connor Lamb's already making noise. I'm not sure who else in the liberal ranks is thinking of a challenge. I'm sure there are in the House ranks and so forth, maybe at the state level. At the same time, if the numbers aren't looking good for him, I'm not sure the Republicans should want him to come over, because other than Israel, I'm not sure what issue he would vote with us on. But what do you make of what's likely to be his political future here?
Greg, I'll be with you in 1 second. I'm just checking one last time. No, still no statement from Mehmet Oz about the October 7th attacks in Israel. But it's still could come any day now. He could be saying something, because he said that despite his past disagreements, he was a strong supporter of Israel. Here it is, September 15th, 2025. You figure maybe it's in my spam folder. I don't know. It just didn't seem to come. Really fascinating to think about how Republicans looked at that Senate race and the choice between Fetterman and Oz since then. Oz now running the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services over at HHS, I believe. So, look, I think the good news for Fetterman is that there will not be one progressive Democrat who wants to challenge him. There's probably going to be a small army of them, and if they divide themselves enough, he should have a smooth sailing to a renomination for a second term. If they can unify behind one more progressive alternative, well, then he's going to have some stress. I don't imagine a scenario in which he switches parties. I think that generally this is still a guy who is the irony is you could make an argument that he's kind of populist in his philosophies towards these things. And the Republican Party is a much more populist and much less conservative entity than it used to be. So it's not crazy or unthinkable. I think it's way too early to contemplate a party switch. I'm thinking of Arlen Specter switching parties.
Yeah, that
he looked like
work.
He was going to have a tough primary challenge from Pat Toomey, and that did not turn out well for him. It was actually Sestak, right? Former retired Admiral Joe Sestak.
Yeah.
One of the few Democratic presidential candidates who's ever called me up and wanted to talk instead of the other way around. God bless him, good guy. And he was in that primary for about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so look, there probably will be a messy primary fight. You figure Fetterman, like if Fetterman says, "Hey, I need some help," there'll be a whole bunch of people, probably even on the right side of the spectrum, who are like, as a Democrat, I'd much rather have you than any of these other hard lefties out there. So it's conceivable he comes out through this okay. Again, it's not till 2028. I was about to say, well, he'll be helped by having Trump on the top of the ticket. That would technically be unconstitutional. But Trump keeps saying, well, I don't think I'm going to run for a third. No, you can't run for a third term, short of altering that. But again, you would think of Vance atop the ticket, or a Rubio, or some other figure. If a Republican is winning the state of Pennsylvania in the presidential race in 2028, and Fetterman is running for re-election, that's probably a good scenario for him.
Yeah, no, yeah. If he gets the nomination, he'll be in a better position, I think. But don't forget that John Fetterman is not only looking at this as an outside observer; he's felt this venom because of his support for Israel and going to these rallies on the Mall and showing the flag, even with members of his own staff who have quit in a fit of rage because he's not towing the line on the far left exactly where they thought he should. So. He's sick of it.
I'll just jump in and say, I stand by everything I wrote, saying that his, state of his health was really bad after the stroke. He was really campaigning minimally. We probably, listeners probably remember, actually, listeners and viewers, you're seeing me say this, probably remember him during that debate with Oz, and that he really couldn't communicate, and that seemed like a really big, deal. Checked himself into Walter Reed, and there were a lot of people who were fairly asking, should this guy be serving as a U.S. Senator? Well, he's in much better shape now. And of course, now that he's in better shape, progressives say, well, he shouldn't be there because he's not voting the way we want. Like, now we have a problem, And by the way, like, you get treated for brain issues and suddenly you become more conservative on certain ones. Like, I'm trying not to interpret it that way. But,
He's only with us 98% of the time. Yeah. Take the message, lefties. Anyway, All right, let's talk about Oracle, because not only are we talking about the future of John Fetterman's political career, but also the future of your business. Ask a bunch of experts, you'll get a bunch of different answers on what the future holds for business. Are we going to have bull markets or bear markets? Will interest rates rise or fall? We're going to get a decision on that fairly soon. Will inflation go up or down? Well, until we get some answers on those things, more than 42,000 businesses have been busy future-proofing their businesses with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR into one fluid platform.
When you're closing your books in days instead of weeks, you are spending less time looking backwards and more time focusing on what's coming next. So whether your company is earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities.
Yeah, and speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/martini. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/martini. That's netsuite.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to our second martini, our bad martini. And President Trump put out a message. I'm guessing this was probably on Truth Social, but it always shows up on X, which is where I see it. So I call it a tweet, even though it probably was a post on Truth Social.
It was a truth, as he likes to call it.
Yes.
He truthed it.
He truthed it. Truth is now a verb. Why not? All right, so let's take a look at this. The president saying, a letter sent by President Donald J. Trump to all NATO nations and the world. I am ready to do major sanctions on Russia when all NATO nations have agreed and started to do the same thing, and when all NATO nations stop buying oil from Russia. As you know, NATO's commitment to win has been far less than 100%, and the purchase of Russian oil by some has been shocking. It greatly weakens your negotiating position and bargaining power over Russia. Anyway, I'm ready to go when you are. Just say when. I believe that this, plus NATO as a group placing 50 to 100% tariffs on China to be fully withdrawn after the war with Russia and Ukraine is ended, will also be of great help in ending this deadly but ridiculous war. China has a strong control and even grip over Russia, and these powerful tariffs will break that grip. This is not Trump's war. It would have never started if I was president. It is Biden's and Zelensky's war. I am only here to help stop it and save thousands of Russian and Ukrainian lives. 7,118 lives lost last week alone. Crazy. If NATO does as I say, the war will end quickly, and all of those lives will be saved. If not, you are just wasting my time and the time, energy, and money of the United States. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Donald Trump, President of the United States of America. And so, Jim, for those watching on video, can spend more time reading the tweet there. But what do you make, first of all, of him trying to get NATO on board to boycott the Russian oil? And what do you make of him trying to put tariffs on China? We'll get in a moment to his description of whose war this is.
Frustrating in a lot of ways because he's right in bits and pieces of that. You could probably make an argument that if China was not filling in the role of Europe and to a lesser extent America as a trade partner to Russia, either Russia would not be able to continue the war or Russia's efforts to continue the war would be greatly complicated. That foreign trade, that foreign investment is really important to Russia right now, keeping the Russian economy afloat. They're not alone in that. India is in there. Unfortunately, some of our Asian allies like Japan and South Korea are in there. And yes, some European countries continue to buy energy from Russia, and that's very bad. As I wrote about, this in the Washington Post and National Review, a few other places. We're also buying enriched uranium from Russia for our nuclear plants. These are in contracts that were negotiated before the war started. Under those contracts, even if we refuse the delivery, they would still get paid. So I understand the idea of they're going to get paid one way or another. We might as well keep getting it. But our allies could justifiably say, hey, wait a minute, why are you punishing us for importing Russian energy materials when you're importing Russian energy materials as well? The other thing that kind of gets me is, Donald Trump has had a lot of criticism made of him, but I'm going to offer a new one today, Greg. Are you ready?
Sure.
Trump is such a multilateralist. The irony, going back to George W. Bush, that he was this unilateralist cowboy, and he didn't give enough, consideration of what do our allies think. He was always going off on his own, doing his own thing. He didn't wait to consult with all these other European countries. And here is Donald Trump saying, well, look, we are really going to hammer Russia as long as Hungary and Turkey are okay with it. Now, that's not likely to happen, in part because Viktor Orbán in Hungary, the ruling party over there, is fairly pro-Putin. I've seen them described as acolytes of Putin. That's probably putting it. But they have a warm and fuzzy attitude towards Moscow and are never going to be enthusiastic about making life too much harder for Vladimir Putin and the regime in Russia. Erdogan in Turkey has been a headache for a long time. He tries to play both sides against the middle. He, too, would be a very difficult person to get on board with this. But I would just say, if the U.S. thinks this is a good idea, yes, it would be nice to get everybody else in NATO. And my guess is of the 30-some countries, you could get 29, 30, you'd get almost everybody, probably except for Hungary and Turkey, on board with this. So why are we giving them a veto? Why are we waiting for the Europeans to say, yes, we should do this? If we think this is a good idea, we should do this. And look, Trump has, come around and been spoken more critical of Putin, which is good. It always seems like, well, in 2 more weeks we're going to see. Well, 2 more weeks keeps going by. 2 more weeks going by. This looks and sounds like making an excuse. This looks and sounds like saying, well, like a person who really doesn't want to enact these additional tariffs or additional sanctions or additional punishments on Russia, and is looking for an excuse, and is now saying, well, if everybody else in NATO agrees that we should do this, then we'll do this. Wait a minute, we're the United States of America. Why do we need a permission slip from anybody else? If we think this is a good idea, and Trump lays out why this is a good idea, we should do this. So I think this is, he's so close to actually doing the right thing. He's so close to getting where he needs to get. And if There are a lot of people who have said, "Oh, he's a stooge of Putin," all kind of stuff. When Trump makes decisions like this, when he frames things this way, he doesn't make his life any easier, and he hands his critics a stick to hit him with. So again, Mr. President, it's like the Nike slogan, which was inspired by a guy at a firing squad. Just do it.
He's probably not going to like this term, but what you're suggesting is a coalition of the willing. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what most of Europe is calling itself on these sorts of things. And so I don't know about you. I don't love that phrase considering the history. I kind of feel like the coalition of the willing was full of a bunch of guys who were like willing to send socks, and camping equipment.
We'll cheer alongside of you.
What's wrong with alliance, right? If nothing else, we're the alliance of the willing. Or the rebel alliance, whatever you want to call it.
All right, real quick, when he says, this war never would have started when I was president, it's not Trump's war, it is Biden's and Zelensky's war. It's obviously Putin's war. Now you can.
Is there anybody else?
You can clearly make the case that Biden's completely incompetent bungling of the withdrawal in Afghanistan encouraged Vladimir Putin to do what he did. But it is Putin that launched this war.
Yeah, and for right of center supporters of Ukraine like itself, the argument that Biden unified NATO or that Biden galvanized NATO or no, Biden was really hesitant, full of half measures, terrified of escalating the fight with Russia. Ukraine had to ask Mother May I on a half dozen different ways. He was always sending weapon systems like 6 months after the Ukrainians said they needed it. Biden's record on Ukraine was really subpar, and for obvious reasons, the Ukrainians did not want to make a lot of noise about this, lest Biden in a huff decided he didn't want to do it. Trump has his flaws. Trump has also made some things right in Ukraine. I feel like Trump has given Putin every possible extension, every possible opportunity to try to get out of this. And, metaphorically, Putin has spat in the face of every single one of them. And it's like, okay, Mr. President, what's it going to take? How many more times can you be snubbed or ignored or made fun of to decide you're going to actually take some action about this? So we continue to wait with bated breath, Greg.
Yeah, no question about that. So, all right, well, let's move past what is not a very pleasant story right there, although it could get more pleasant depending on what happens soon, to talk about Brooklyn bedding. Jim, I've had this mattress for a month now, a little more than a month, and I'm pretty sure I'm on the verge of declaring that in all of my decades of existence, this is my favorite mattress of all time. And that is saying something, because I've had some pretty good mattresses over the years. But Brooklyn Bedding, we ordered the Aurora Luxe model, which is a cooling mattress, so you don't get too hot while you sleep. And it's got some firmness, yet it's soft somehow at the same time. And here's the thing that I love to test about new mattresses. When you wake up after a long night's sleep on a new mattress, usually if I'm in a hotel or we're on vacation or something, I get sore, especially after a couple of days. With the Brooklyn Bedding mattress, absolutely perfect. Doesn't make me sore, keeps me comfortable, great night's sleep.
Brooklyn Bedding handcrafts every mattress in their Arizona factory. How can a mattress so cool come from a state that's so hot? But there are no middlemen, no gimmicks, just top-tier quality, honest pricing, and real American craftsmanship. Brooklyn Bedding knows that sleep isn't one size fits all. That's why they offer mattresses for everybody with every sleep style, even in hard-to-find sizes. If you're not sure which mattress is right for you, just take the Brooklyn Bedding Sleep Quiz and find your perfect match in under 2 minutes.
So go to brooklynbedding.com and use our promo code 3ML at checkout to get 30% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. That's brooklynbedding.com and the promo code 3ML for 30% off site-wide. Make sure you enter our show name after checkout so they know the 3 Martini Lunch sent you. All right, as foreshadowed at the beginning, Jim, we have an endorsement in the New York City mayor's race. It is not a shocking endorsement. It is kind of a weaselly endorsement, if you ask me, given the timing of it. But Kathy Hochul, the less than competent and really not a good politician, who's the governor of New York State, is endorsing Zohran Mamdani for mayor of New York City. And I think this is happening for a couple of reasons, which I'll get to in just a moment. But let's go through her perfunctory writing at the New York Times today. She says, in the past few months, I've had frank conversations with him, meaning Mamdani. We've had our disagreements, but in our conversations, I heard a leader who shares my commitment to a New York where children can grow up safe in their neighborhoods and where opportunity is within reach for every family. I heard a leader who is focused on making New York City affordable, a goal I enthusiastically support. Well, thanks for staying super vague on that. But here's what she really cares about. Zohran Mamdani and I will both be fearless in confronting the president's extreme agenda with urgency, conviction, and the defiance that defines New York, and we'll never allow Mr. Trump to control our city like the king he wants to be. We don't see eye to eye, and I don't expect us to. So number one, she thinks he's going to win, so there's not a lot of risk in this, and she wants the people who vote for him to vote for her because she's got a little bit of a primary fight coming up next year. And she is banking, basically, that New York City won't fall apart by the time next year's midterm elections roll around, and she can get another 4 years. So what do you make of this quote-unquote profile and courage?
Greg, it just dawned on me that now that we're doing this in video format, I can't make off-color gestures when you're reading the excerpts from Hochul speeches. Or you can't see my hands, viewers, so just use your imagination. So this is not a surprising endorsement. In a way, it's kind of interesting that it came relatively late in the cycle. It's mid-September. Mamdani is, unfortunately, still at this point, looks like not just the likely winner, but he's probably going to cruise to victory. And I suppose if you're Hochul, she's not going to endorse Curtis Sliwa, the Republican option.
No.
She got her job from Cuomo getting kicked out, so it's not like, hey, remember the guy I replaced? He'd be great for you in New York City. No, she's not going to do that. And Eric Adams, she's not a particularly warm and fuzzy relationship with either. So if you make your Philly better, America, Kathy Hochul is facing the exact same challenge that a whole bunch of New York City voters are. This crap. Although on this podcast, we are big fans of Curtis Sliwa. If you haven't checked it out in the archives, listen to our interview. Entertaining, and I think makes you feel like you wish Sliwa had a better shot in this race. The other thing that I found interesting out of this, so she's going through the motions in this, hoping it doesn't get too bad. What I found interesting, this happened just a little bit after Chris Van Hollen, senator from Maryland, saying that it's time for national Democrats to get behind Zohran Mamdani. Many party leaders have not. Now, you and I have been talking throughout this fall, and obviously the New York City mayor's race gets a lot of attention because it's in an off year. I mean, Mamdani is effectively an out-and-out communist, despite what that New York Times article tying itself into knots was saying there. He definitely is, let's globalize the Intifada. He looks at the city with crime, with homelessness, with drug abuse, with poor city services, and he says, you know what the city needs? We need to run some grocery stores. That's what's, the biggest problem. If you're a Democrat running in that open house seat in Omaha, Nebraska, if you are Roy Cooper running for that Senate seat in North Carolina, Zohran Mamdani is not your friend. And Republicans are going to do everything possible to try to tie you to Zohran Mamdani. So, no, you're not going to be endorsing them. But even if you're not a particularly endangered Democrat, I don't know if you're helping your party very much if you decide to tie yourself to Zohran Mamdani. Because Zohran Mamdani, unfortunately, looks like he's going to be the mayor. And my bet is not that New York City has this delightful renaissance in the next couple of years under Mamdani. You can make an argument that the mayor doesn't run the city himself, and the city council will probably not go along with at least some of his ideas. Hochul may not go along with all of his ideas. But the question is, do you want a mayor who's pushing in the right direction, or do you want a mayor who's pushing in the wrong direction? And Mamdani is definitely that. So, it's not just that, Hochul is going to have to get on board. It's the fact that Van Hollen and other Democrats are saying, okay, every Democrat, jump on the bandwagon. Really surprising that they don't grasp the potential risk he presents to the rest of the party.
No, they're perfectly fine with socialism as long as the socialist wins. That was the only hesitation they had going into that primary. It's pretty clear by now. Hochul actually says here that she and Mamdani discussed policing, combating anti-Semitism, and New York's economy. She makes no reference to what they agreed on, if they agreed on anything. And I love the fact that they agreed that things should be more affordable. Did they get any more specific on this stuff?
Yeah,
or is just that, gosh, things cost too much? They sure do. All right, we're in agreement on that. Let's move on. So, and I don't know if you saw this, Jim, if this has been verified, but I saw somewhere on X that after Van Hollen said that about all the national Democrats getting on board, that Hakeem Jeffries, who represents New York City and has not endorsed Mamdani, said, Chris Van who? So if that's true, you've got popcorn, like we talked about on Friday, for Biden and Harris. Now we've got Van Hollen and Jeffries. Man, A lot of popcorn. It's going to be great for the popcorn industry on the left.
You're from Maryland, man. What do you know about this stuff?
Right. He's still having martinis or margaritas with
hey, nothing wrong with martinis. Nothing wrong.
It's true.
By the way, as listeners can probably tell, Greg and I, at this point, as we record this podcast, are sober-ish. And I've run into many people who are like, do you guys really drink? No, we do not. Otherwise it would sound even less coherent than it already does. So sorry to disappoint you. Maybe we'll get like fake ones or something and we'll raise our glasses. Now that we have video to do, we need to be more visually interesting.
Yes, like maybe
some Friday we should do one where we actually drink and we'll see how that one turns out.
I don't know. We want to get that precedent going this quickly. We're sober today. I was also sober yesterday when the Bears lost by 31 to the Lions.
No,
Jim,
that's the worst way to be.
I don't know if you were when the Bills quickly jumped out to an insurmountable lead on your Jets. Both teams are 0-2. It's the middle of September, and we're already thinking about draft positioning, I think. But maybe things will turn around. Probably not, but maybe.
Our teams have had somewhat comparable starts to the season in a competitive opening game against a tough rival where they fell apart towards the end, and you're kind of like, it's so close. But at least you got to enjoy the early parts of the game where the team looked like it was making progress. And then week 2 just got blown out. Game was over at halftime. And as I was trying to describe to friends after the game, this was a game of, sometimes you hear, this game was a story of two halves. Yes, it was that way for the Jets in that the first half was an enormous disappointment. But then in the second half, it was an even bigger disappointment. Like that. Because you're always like, oh man, they're down 20-3. Can you just just show you don't have quit? Just come out and play hard in the second half. No, that's saying this team doesn't have a lot of quit in it. This team has quit coming out of its ears. This team, So I looked at that, and so I'm feeling bummed. And you're like, why am I sitting in this restaurant? I'm having a great time with my son, but otherwise I'm like, there are other things I could be doing with my Sunday afternoon. And then I wake up this morning, Greg, and I see the news. Cincinnati Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow, who's already missed, last season a ton of time, missed chunks of other seasons because of injuries, injured again. Looks like he's going to be out 3 months. And I don't like here from a Jets fan and a Bears fan, Cincinnati Bengals fans, we feel for you. That is brutal. That is rough. I saw more than a few comparisons to Andrew Luck. That sense of a potentially all-time great quarterback who just doesn't get the protection he needs and keeps getting injured. So, Cincinnati fans, we feel you. We've been there. That is just a rough way to go. Maybe he can come back. Maybe you can salvage something in the season. But it's really bad when we look like, whoa, thank goodness we're not those guys.
Yes, some other fan base is more depressed than we are. If that's the silver lining.
That's what I go for.
After week 2, we're not in a good place. Jim, have a good day. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch podcast if you don't already. YouTube, your favorite podcast platform. Just make sure you're subscribed any way you can. And get your friends to join us as well. We'd love to have them listening and watching. Also, thanks very much for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific Monday. Join us again on Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.